What's a good psychological trick that you use with success most of the times? One of the best ways for cementing your knowledge of something is to teach it to someone else. I frequently tell my students, college, that something is tricky or more difficult than it actually is. That way, students feel good about themselves when they understand it. And they feel more comfortable with asking questions. If I tell them, it's easy, they have more anxiety about it and feel stupid. Obviously, you have to use this carefully to not appear condescending or seem like a weird person. Tell someone, if I can make your hand flip over without touching it. Will you buy me, insert whatever, then ask them to put their hand out, and when they do, say, no, the other way. My friend did this to me the other day, I lost $10 ugh. I am an occupational therapist with early intervention, which means I do home therapy with the 0 to 3 age group. Sometimes they are preemies. Sometimes they have autism. Sometimes language delays. Sometimes genetic disorders. Whatever the diagnosis is, it often leaves moms feeling isolated, overwhelmed and incompetent. Whenever I am doing therapy, I will subtly orient the child so that the mom is on the direction that's easiest for the child to turn. And then I sing a song or play a game that I know will make the child really happy, and right when they laugh or smile, I will say, look, she's looking for you. Look at how much she loves you. I can really see how much she loves you, Mom. It always reinforces the parent-child bond, which almost always leads to a positive feedback loop of smiles and love from mom to child, which hopefully makes mom feel a little more secure and at ease. In an argument, find something to agree on, then push your main point. I have had great success using this method and it always works. Absolutely. My father was a top-level diplomat, ambassador to the UN Security Council, where of course the name of the game is to debate very contentious issues amicably. He very much followed your approach of looking for points of agreement before pushing the harder issues. One thing he was very skilled at is debating in a way that avoided triggering the other person's ego too much. Basically, the polar opposite of most internet debates where people instantly trigger the ego defenses of the other by mocking, calling their point stupid, etc. My dad's theory was, why on earth would you create more obstacles and resistance to your point of view by unnecessarily triggering the ego, fight reflex in the other? I work with kids, so I really use social referencing to my advantage. If a kid falls, they look around to adults to see how the adult reacts. If the adult rushed over and starts coddling, the child will usually overreact because they think it's needed. If the adult doesn't seem concerned, the child is quicker to move on. Also, when I was younger, my mom would use a trick on me. She told me that she knew when I was lying because my tongue would turn green. She'd ask me a question, listen to the answer, then ask me to stick out my tongue. If I tried to hide it, she knew I was lying. My parents used to say that our eyes turned green when we were lying. They looked us in the eye to check. It worked for the most part, but I remember my sister failing this check when she was actually in the right. She went ballistic. Rightly so, and Mum and Dad agreed that the green was a reflection of something or other. If my kids are giving me a hard time about eating something, I tell them it's okay, they're probably not big enough yet. Then they eat it to prove me wrong. My son's too big of a hole. I used to use that on him. Then around age 3 he just started saying, yeah, probably. Reflective listening, simply being there with someone and reflecting their words and sentiments back to them. When someone shares a problem or grief or complaint with us, we often have the instinct to say, I'm sorry. As in, I'm sorry for the loss of your mother. What is the natural reaction when someone says, sorry? Usually to say, that's okay. But it is not okay. Don't put someone in the position of comforting you for their loss. Instead, show that you see and feel their grief. That's so awful. I can't imagine how upset you must be. This invites the other person to tell you more. Impose optimism, things will get better. Yeah. Maybe. But right now the person is upset and needs you to hear and validate that feeling. You can show you understand by saying, that sounds really tough. Even "dude that really sucks" shows empathy without trying to push them to stifle their feelings or suck it up when they're just trying to be heard. Relate to the other person. Friend, I got a parking ticket. Man. You, ugh. That's the worst. I got a parking ticket yesterday too. Man. This may be appropriate later in the conversation. But it shouldn't be your first reaction to make it about you. Stay with them. Oh no. What happened? Invites them to tell you more. If a complaint, be defensive or apologize immediately. Acknowledgement is important. I really messed up. That was an error on my part. Or if you feel you didn't do anything wrong. At least, I can see why you're upset with the situation. In each of these situations, you can use reflective listening to show that you hear the other person and you're with them in their feelings. You're validating their anger, grief, and allowing them the safety of being in it with you before moving on. I use this with kids all the time. Instead of "you're okay." Pet peeve, we can help kids label and understand their feelings by saying, "I see you're really upset right now." This gives them the vocabulary to express themselves rather than resorting to undesirable behaviors like hitting. When I'm super stressed about an upcoming event, usually a medical appointment or some social event, I pretend it's a week or a month after the event and that the event wasn't that bad at all. It helps me to get over the anxiety leading up to the days, hours, and minutes leading up to the event. In my mind, I know the event isn't that big of a deal. But anxiety always messes things up. So thinking beyond the event is the game changer for me. Whenever I get upset and realize that I'm spiraling, I start listing things out loud that I'm grateful for. It's very hard to be anxious, depressed, scared when you're thinking about what's gone right for you. Once you get the hang of it, it's easy to make it into a long process to give yourself more positivity time. I'm grateful to have a functioning car. Well, what else about my car am I grateful for? All the awesome CDs I have. My car stereo. Songs I like on the radio. Hey, you know, gas prices have been lower lately. Well, how do I afford my car? A job I like. A wage I can survive on. Co-workers I love. A boss that treats me well. Or maybe I'm grateful for friends and the places we hang out or the scenery in my area of the state. I can list gratitudes for an hour or more if I need to. It really does the trick. And it gets easier the more I do it. When you need something from someone, explicitly say, "I need your help," before making your request. Most people like to be needed and feel fulfilled when they've helped someone. Steelmanning. It's the opposite of strawmanning. When arguing, if you know you're right, then paraphrase the strongest, most ideal and robust possible version of your opponent's argument, and then argue against that. This builds trust and shows that you really do understand, see their perspective and aren't trying to downplay their ideas. It's disarming. And people tend to agree more when they feel like their opinions have been understood. This definitely works. But it requires familiarity with and a deeper understanding of the opposing argument. And it also only really works when the opposing argument actually has at least some sense to it, otherwise you might end up putting more thought into your steelman of their argument than they've put into their actual argument, e.g. flat earthers. At that point you're just wasting your time by trying to have an intellectually honest debate. And you might as well just give up attempting to earn their trust. The lesser of two evils. Working as a manager, part of my job is to keep people busy. Some people do not respond well with being told what to do. Offering two tasks, the one I want the employee to be doing against an equally feasible yet less desirable task, often will send the employee into a productive and happily grateful mode of doing said task. Then I take on the less than desirable one I was planning on doing anyways with good spirit, leaving a positive example on both myself and said task. No experience here, but I can't imagine why this wouldn't work well on children. Acting confident to convince people you know what you are doing. My boss does this in work daily. My therapist gave me the great advice that the word "should" is terrible for motivation procrastination. I'm re-saying it far less eloquently, but basically instead of saying you should do the dishes, you should say I will do the dishes, which tricks your brain into doing it. Because should is far less matter of fact. Meanwhile, I will is very set in stone. It took me a while to do it. But now I barely ever say I should do X, Y, Z. And actually my motivation has gone up. When I'm nervous, I convince myself it's excitement. The heart racing. The racing thoughts. The alertness, I tell myself it's all energy pumping myself up to confront a challenge. It's almost the exact same physiological response. A lifetime of chronic anxiety left me struggling to experience excitement as a positive emotion. But once I recognized the problem, I was able to start practicing to change the way I respond emotionally to the physiological event. It's not all the time. But it is getting better. Mindfulness works wonders. I have to ask people to do small favors for you. They'll tend to like you more this way. Benjamin Franklin effect. When arguing, verbally repeat your opponent's position and ask, "Is this what you mean?" Or something similar. Firstly, this makes you understand the point better, but if it's bullshit, also makes them realize it faster. If you feel a panic attack coming on, embrace it. Tell yourself it's happening and welcome it. More often than not, the panic attack will subside. The way they work is through fear of having a panic attack. For example, I'm going to embarrass myself. People will look at me, etc. If you take away that fear and allow it to come, it will go away. Mirroring people. Not just in their body movements, but also in their time, language. I only do this if I'm trying to connect with someone. And it seems to work really well. Sometimes on the tube, when standing without holding anything on a stable part of the track, I will pretend to randomly wobble and almost grab onto something. Pretty quickly I will see other people grab onto something, regardless if they are standing or sitting. I get bored when commuting. Starting phone calls with, "Did I catch you at a bad time?" Learned this trick from Never Split the Difference. The author is a former FBI hostage negotiator. Most people start conversations with, "Hey, do you have a minute to talk?" which makes people defensive. For what reason? Why with you? Talk about what? Etc. Getting people to say no is a key factor that allows them to open up by saying no. Of course not. I'm not doing much anyways. Definitely helps when calling. Especially when negotiating or work is involved.